Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with three key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals, including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Good evening, Malcontents, and welcome to another episode of Malcontentment Happy Hour, live from the Seattle Anarchist Jurisdiction, and Happy New Year as we extend two middle fingers to the year 2020. I would like to welcome my co-host, Jennifer Smith. Jennifer, Happy New Year to you.
How are you doing?
Doing very well. How are you?
I'm pretty tired. I've been up since 4 and did a lot of stuff with the animals today. So I'm a little tired, but I'm excited to be here. So it's good.
Yes, Yoda decided to wake me up at about 6 o'clock this morning. I went to bed at about 2 in the morning, as you know, because was editing videos for this show until about 2 in the morning. So, and then went back and kept editing stuff. So it's going to be crazy, folks. And so with that, we'll talk a little bit, because this is what we said we were going to do. We would do just like a couple of minutes of big headlines and stuff to talk about. And this is probably the biggest news. We're just going to talk for a couple of minutes and we're going to dive right in because we have a lot to cover because a lot happened in 2020 as we run through what we feel were the top 5 stories that we covered in 2020 with a few surprises thrown in there. And so the first top story, I would say we're going to go to Washington, D.C., because it just seems like we keep going back to Washington, D.C. Donald Trump has decided he doesn't want to be humiliated around all of his friends and adoring worshipers down at Mar-a-Lago and has got on a plane and is not going to attend his own New Year's Eve party. The other thing that's happening in Washington, D.C. is that Mitch McConnell has basically taken any chance for $2,000 of relief and gone to it, calling it, and I quote, socialism for the rich. I had no idea that if somebody was making $75,000 a year or less, or $150,000 a year as a household or less, was rich in the United States. I didn't get that memo, Mitch, and I don't think a lot of other people got that memo. Another thing that we're going to talk about here, Morning March, literally right before we went on the air, Morning March shut down the I-99 tunnel in Seattle, and this was, they had shut down I-5 maybe about 2 hours before that. In protest circles, we like to call this good trouble. And I know what they were doing in the State Route 99 tunnel was a 8-minute and 46-second pause in honor of George Floyd. We know that there's a number of protests that are planned today. Jennifer, as you know, there's some other news, but it actually ties into some of the top 5 stories. And so we will get into those as we get into those top 5 stories.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a lot coming tonight. There's a lot to cover, and yeah, we've got a lot of protests. We've got the COVID things going on. Washington D.C. in disarray. So it's a busy night.
And we were so hopeful for 2021, and
Oh,
2021 is just going to start where 2020 left off. But with that, let's go ahead, and we're going to go ahead to story number 5. And story number 5 takes us to, well, the entire world. And story number 5 is about COVID 19. And COVID 19 has dominated the news cycle and dominated life throughout the world. And no other country, in terms of number of people who have died, number of people sickened, amount of resources thrown at it, can parallel what has happened in the United States. On March 12th, I wrote a post on my personal Facebook page, not on the Malcontentment Tango page. And I have my personal page at that time was set up for friends of friends. And there were people that said, "Hey, can you make this public? I'd like to share it." And I was like, "Sure." And the post went completely viral, Jennifer. And we started, this is when actually Malcontentment Tango, we've rebranded as Malcontentment News in 2020. But this is where Malcontentment Tango started all of a sudden getting a very big audience. And we did a lot of COVID coverage. And with that, I want to revisit some of the facts that were dropped and some of the predictions that were made back on March 12th.
Here at Evergreen Hospital, we've had, and I still believe now have, the largest cohort of critically ill coronavirus patients in the United States.
Last month, the famed restaurateur announced that he was closing 12 of his 13 restaurants because of the coronavirus. He went from having more than 800 employees down to just 5.
Boeing said today that they were going to be notifying employees that they're making their first layoffs since the COVID virus hit. They're going to lay off over 6,700 people.
Unfortunately, layoffs are a hard but necessary step to align to our new reality, preserve liquidity, and position ourselves for the eventual return to growth.
The coronavirus has devastated the airline industry. U.S. air travel has dropped 95% compared to last year.
Starbucks is reducing service to drive-through and delivery only. The coffee giant is closing access to cafes for at least 2 weeks across the country.
Major League Baseball will, in fact, suspend all operations indefinitely. Of course, a lot of questions. What does that mean? We do not have those details at this time, but we can tell you that all operations are going to be suspended.
Therefore, I'll be signing several executive orders this afternoon. Today, my first order will close all K through 12 public and private schools in every district across the state of Washington.
It is getting busy inside local grocery stores, places like Sam's Club and Hy-Vee.
It was swamped.
Shelves are empty and the lines are long.
Worried customers have been snapping up everything in sight. Store shelves nationwide are dwindling or totally empty.
This may be a first here in Western Washington at Fire Station 21 in Kirkland. You can see the sign on the doorway behind me. It has been quarantined due to COVID-19 exposure. Do not enter.
The restrictions that the president put in place for over 30 countries that we have in place now. Under these restrictions, we'll again identify them, look at them medically, and do a number of checks as they come back into the country. So that's what we're doing now. DHS and CBP have screened over 150,000 folks.
I understand what you're saying, that people need to hear positive thinking. But, you know, for the past 5 months, it's been the virus is totally under control. And the cases have been going up and the deaths have been going up.
Look.
But you've been saying it's under control.
Nobody knew what this thing was all about. This has never happened before.
With skyrocketing case numbers and an apparent shortage of supplies of essential equipment,
I quit my job today.
Some healthcare workers like Imaris Vera say the risk has grown too great.
This isn't going to get any better.
New York State now has more reported coronavirus cases than any country in the world. Let that sink in for just a second. And new pictures are a disturbing reminder of the human toll of that. This is a mass grave being dug for coronavirus victims at New York City's Potter's Field, where unclaimed bodies are laid to rest.
I really wanted to be wrong on everything there with every fiber of my being. And I guess I'll ask the snarky question, profit or criminal mastermind controlling the entire COVID thing?
Is this about you? Because I heard that, there were some people that thought that you were maybe controlling COVID for your own benefits.
Well, I certainly have not. I have not benefited from it. There was an individual yesterday on our Twitter feed. We put up a thing because Dr. Drew was one of the people very early in this, right, who was essentially a COVID denier. I'm not going to repeat on air what they said and give oxygen, pun friggin' intended, to that false narrative about it being akin to a other far less lethal disease and far more treatable disease. And at the time, a disease that had a vaccine that's widely distributed versus the shit show we have for vaccine right now. And my thing to do, because Dr. Drew was like, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I got it. It sucked, right? You don't want this. And what I put up on the Twitter, and I'll own it, was like, fuck you. And then somebody, literally, I put, in the words of my father, very wise man, fuck you. And one of the first replies was, it's not unfair, and how could he know? And, back then, people were just, it's like, people, like, what? Really? Back in March? People...
Yeah. People knew. I don't know. It's so crazy to me that so many people are still unwilling to either they're wanting to play devil's advocate or just kind of unwilling to accept the severity of the issue.
And the forecast is 80,000 Americans are going to die in the next 3 weeks. We are now approaching 4,000 Americans dying a day, 3,725. 2 days ago, we haven't heard the numbers from yesterday yet, at least not at airtime. And the 3,725, that's national, not state of Washington. That 3,725 beat the previous record. And juxtaposed to that, 1.3 million people getting on airplanes and flying around.
Yeah, that's insane to me. And, we were talking yesterday, and I think you put up stats like 1 in 1,000 people are actually, is it getting COVID or dying from COVID?
Have died. 1 in 1,000 Americans have died. It is one of the leading killers in 2020, if not the leading killer of people in 20. And I remember the arguments was, oh, it's, let's compare it to car accidents. Let's compare it, right? Yeah. And they kept moving the bar, right? And now it's like, well, people die. And it's like, no, this was very preventable. And one of the things that's stunning to me is our government, where I said, the response was non-existent. What I was referring to that is we flew back internationally on February 26th, and we passed through 4 different airports in 4 different countries on the way back. And as we got closer and closer to the westernized world, as we move further away from what Donald Trump would call shithole countries, the seriousness in the response got less and less. And when we got to the United States, we felt like we could have brought in 20 kilos of cocaine and 50 pounds of ivory from Africa with us, and nobody would have said a thing.
Yeah, no, that's... It's really insane. And, it's progressively getting worse, and you still have a bunch of deniers out there. And, we're going through this, stats came out, what was it yesterday, that at the rate we're going with vaccination, it could take years to develop herd immunity. There's all these really interesting, not so great things going on the COVID front right now that kind of stems from this larger issue of people really not buying into the severity of the pandemic early on and not protecting themselves. And, initially a lot of people were talking about, oh, it's something that really affects older people because we saw so many people die early on in, assisted living homes. But now you're seeing, what was it? Was it Congressman the other day? It was only 41 who just died from COVID.
Congressman, technical Congressman-elect, he was elected November 4, never got to get sworn in. 41 years old, no comorbidities, but didn't wear a mask, never came out like as a denier, but the behavior speaks volumes.
Yeah. And then I was reading a story this morning about a 35-year-old teacher who, was teaching virtually, doing everything that she was supposed to do, and she caught COVID and passed away. So it's not something that is, explicitly targeting older people or people with underlying health issues. It's, it affects younger, otherwise healthy people. And now that we have this addition of this new, more contagious strain hitting in places like California and Colorado, and after holiday travel, it's going to be everywhere. People need to be more diligent about practicing social distancing, limiting who they're seeing, doing all these things, because we're never going to get out of this. It's just going to be a continuous cycle otherwise.
One of our commenters said that 2020 is the amuse-en-bouche for 2021. No.
Oh my God, I have alcohol for later.
And yes, Amy, Yoda has made it to the finish line of 2020. He is 14 days away from officially being 17. Although I do think that he is doing psychological experiments on my limits of sleep deprivation right now, but we'll save that story for another time. With that, I want to move to one of our almost top 5 stories.
Is this the PDX one?
Oh, look what's going on. Oh, they dropped a smoke bomb. This is like the best music for this. Oh my God. It's the theme to the Benny Hill Show to the Portland Police Department. Oh my, this is. Sell it on Twitch. Cut that clip to that. So the story behind that is we didn't dub that music. All of that happened in sync with just a random person playing music in that moment. And it was just, it's like fiction is, right? Like life is stranger than fiction in that moment. It was just so perfectly tuned in.
That was fantastic when I watched that video earlier, because of course I can't see the videos when we're talking here. I was like dying. That was how that aligned in that particular way. Is just like the universe, you know, giving us this great gift. Because yeah, that was pretty fantastic.
It was. And with that, we're going to go to story number 4 for 2020. And our number 4 story takes us to Seattle, Washington. And our number 4 story is May 30th and the George Floyd protests that happened on that day. It's something that is well known. It is a keystone moment in 2020 for the city of Seattle. It's a keystone moment for 650 cities and towns across the United States. And it also is one of the first like news streams that I ever did for Malcontentment Tango. We had done many other streams, but this was kind of the first time that this was, hey, we're going to show a story. And also was running a GoPro. And I'm going to go ahead and just roll the clip, and then Jennifer, we can have a little discussion about it.
I don't know. Can you get his license plate on the back? That way if he splatters me, we know who splattered me. Because he doesn't have a license plate up front. If you caught a glimpse of that, but the black bloc anarchists are coming in now, and they're going to stir this up. And that dude, and Julia's got a picture of him, is white as Wonder Bread, and right there. What I want you to see, and I want you to share it. It is white people that are getting ready to stir the pot here. And I want everyone to really understand that. Those were firecrackers. Those are white anarchists who have come here to co-opt this. And you're seeing it. You're seeing it happen. I will keep filming. I will keep staying here as long as I can.
Yeah. Tear gas down the hill.
Oh.
Yeah. Armored car, SWAT coming in.
And this person down here is just getting ready to drive right into it. There is a huge group of people running down from the other direction here. And the tear gas is starting to roll up the hill, so we're going to roll down this way. I don't know what happened because we were under the bridge. All right, those are flashbang grenades, and they were to our west, southwest. That's not thunder. Yeah, we're kind of getting squeezed into the tear gas cloud here.
So the KCBQ video, when that first flashbang goes off there, or a tear gas canister, I'm not sure which, but it looks like a flashbang because tear gas has a yellow hue to it. That was that boom that you heard as we were walking down. And the tear gas was kind of rolling in both directions there. And something that I learned that day is I have a pretty high threshold for it, and Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent has like no threshold for it. She actually was completely blinded with it, and I had to kind of help her back up the hill. We were in this little bubble where it was just insane a couple of blocks down, and it was just insane a couple of blocks north of us. And we were just in this little bubble we popped out on the highway where things were relatively calm.
Yeah, that was such a crazy day. And there was so much, I guess, both like anger and enthusiasm to do something about this because, people were just sick and tired of, Black men being murdered by the police. But I remember I was at home with my kids and somebody was there sending me pictures of it, of police cars on fire and people running, doing all this crazy stuff. So all of that video, getting to watch that again was super, super fascinating. But yeah, it was definitely a turning point, I think, as far as protest and the movement in Seattle. And then, we'll get in a little bit later to CHOP and some of the other things that are happening, but definitely a turning point, both nationally and locally.
One of the things I want to clarify is I call out Black Bloc anarchists, and something that I have learned since May 30th is Black Bloc isn't necessarily associated with anarchy. That's number one, right? This has been a journey for me. So if people are like, unfollow, come on. Right, that's the one. So that's number one. The second thing is anarchists come in a variety of flavors. That I did know, but I always associated Black Bloc anarchists with the type of anarchists that want to, and there is just as there is a segment on the far right, on the very far right, that just want to burn it all down. There's a segment on the very far left. They just want to burn it all down. That's it. And they're in this movement called Boogaloo, and they're on the left and are on the right, mostly right, but some left ideology align into Boogaloo. So it's not me calling out people in Bloc. That group of people that we slowed down and highlighted, we saw them in two other places that day. And wherever we saw them, either chaos broke out or they would be immediately leaving the area after chaos broke out. And the other thing, Jennifer, that sticks out to me is, they've made investigations have taken months, but they've made about 4 or 5 very significant arrests. People that burned police cruisers, people that stole rifles. Only one of them you could call semi-local to Seattle, a person from Edmonds. That's it. Everyone else was either from out of state. There was the one guy, the arms dealer, gangbanger, arms dealer. He's a gangbanger. People don't use it. He's a call for what it is. You want me to call, right? You want us to call someone on the right a domestic terrorist when if you're an arms dealer running with gangs, you're a gangbanger.
Yeah.
Right? We're at equal opportunity here. And that guy at Everett, right? Gun runner, basically. And that's why he stole the guns. And they still haven't recovered the guns or the silencers he took.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what's particularly interesting, too, is, when the protests first started breaking out, there was actually a group over, like, in the University Village area that was protesting. And you actually saw, like, truck fulls of predominantly white men, like, parking, carrying backpacks, and taking off over that direction. And I was like, that's kind of weird. What are you doing? But so it's really interesting to me. And then, when you have that kind of damage that's inflicted by people who are just out to burn it all down, that's what tends to get focused on by the media and not some of these, other like more, I guess, meaningful things that are going on underneath that, trying to get at the root of these problems, because so much is hyper focused on the actions of these particular people.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, May 30th started a whole chain reaction, and we'll get to our third story, but I got another runner-up.
This is called religious discrimination. I've been through this before. This is religious discrimination. This is an open sidewalk. You're not going to tell a Christian to leave. It's an abomination. Now start doing your job. I respect the police. I stand with the police. Why are you trying to kick a Christian out just because you don't like his message? It's wrong. The name of the Lord shall be praised. We are going to continue to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ until the return of Jesus. Until Jesus returns to set up his kingdom.
Look, if I had to suffer through Matthew for the last 7 months, y'all gonna have to get a little dose of Matthew. And Matthew has been a constant figure in the protest scenes. And as you saw, it didn't matter. He didn't focus on one political agenda or not. He was everywhere.
Yeah. Really interesting stuff. But I mean, I guess if you're looking to get the word out, you go where the people are. Commend you for, enduring 7 months of that, among other things. It's definitely interesting.
If I'm ever arrested, SPD, you could lock me in a cell with him, and him, like with the Bible, that would be absolutely psychological torture. I would be begging for solitary confinement.
Yeah. Definitely a very interesting thing. And like I said, a great way to get the word out to people if that's what your agenda is. We often have several people like that on the UW campus that don't care what's going on. They'll stand in the middle of Red Square and they'll preach the Bible and do their thing. And people just kind of go by and do their thing. And, it's whatever. But when you're in the middle of something that intense, to have that kind of distraction continuously, I'm sure it was quite an adventure.
I'm just putting the bottle down there. Jennifer, I think you might have a messenger app or Facebook or something running in the background there, because we're hearing all your system sounds.
There we go. I just closed out the Facebook page. Yeah, it's our message loop dinging. Facebook,
got it. And Matthew, Bumblebee Tuna, my friend. Bumblebee Tuna, the most aerodynamic tuna available. Loaves and fishes. Praise him. Have an anointed day. I am sure we will see more. Oh, Yoda turned his head. He's not as deaf as he pretends to be. We will have, yes, Yoda's right over there. We will probably see more of Matthew in 2021.
Oh, I'm sure.
And with that, we're going to go to the third story. No roundup of 2020 of the top stories in Seattle would be complete if it did not include CHOP, regardless of where our focus was as a news agency, and kind of moving from advocacy into journalism, and that was part of my personal journey in June. We have a lot of clips because so much happened from the evening of May 30th to July 1, and then a few days after that. So what we're just going to do is we're going to jump through those clips. We're going to talk about them for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to jump into the next clip as we go down this path and this journey of what happened in June. And with that, I'm going to roll the first clip. So if you're just tuning in, we're at the Doctors for Justice March.
Jenny Durkin! Dale Constantine!
Can you hear us?
Jay Inslee!
Can you hear us?
When I say power to the people, you say all power to the people. Power to the people!
All power to the people! They've said it's been okay to be at the site all day today. They said it's been okay for here to be all day today. I've been over, you see me, man. I've been here for a second. Here.
Yeah, just stay on that side and we're cool. Not a problem, okay?
Yeah,
right.
We're good. We're good, right? So the National Guard has been deployed. This is America. This is your country. This is your city. If you love your nation, if you love the Constitution, if you believe in basic rights and freedom for all citizens, you need to be here. There's a lot to unpack there in like 3 to 5 minutes. That's why I kind of laughed, but we'll try to keep the conversation short here.
A lot of early, again, back to this enthusiasm and momentum that came after that initial May 30th march and moving it up into Capitol Hill. I was up there in the first week of June for a couple days. And it was very I don't know how to say it. It was very inspiring. But there was, I don't know. I mean, you were on the ground there far more than I was. So, as we get into some of these later clips, it gets far more intense. But the energy that came out of the initial protests and manifested up there was really kind of incredible.
Yeah, at the opening of that was the White Coats for Black Lives. There was a national march, but they called it something slightly different in Seattle, but it was essentially White Coats for Black Lives. There were over 60,000 people at that march. So they started at Harborview Medical Center, to march down the hill to City Hall. And when the speeches were going on, there were people still up at Harborview, not because they were lazy, because they couldn't move any further. It was just a wall of people, and the entire plaza was surrounded there.
Yeah. And like I said, that's the kind of energy that came out of, the kind of energy and enthusiasm and passion and commitment to change that so many people had, that we see kind of like, again, continue to manifest itself, through the early part of July, until there's some additional underlying issues that kind of take center stage. But there was, like I said, a whole lot of energy and enthusiasm to, I guess, for lack of better terms, bring about some much needed and overdue change.
Now, a lot of the people from the White Coats for Black Lives marched up to Capitol Hill. But as they started to go home, and the group of protesters there were less white-skinned and less college educated and less viewed as pillars of the community, the tone and tenor of the police specifically continued to change, and they got more and more aggressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that's the interesting thing. And I was thinking about this today when I was watching some of these clips, like, what it means to amplify BIPOC voices versus kind of standing there and speaking out for them. And it's not to discredit any of the stuff that any white people did during the protests for whatever reason. But it's really interesting to me to kind of think more critically about what it means to be an ally and stand back and amplify versus speaking for,
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead. I agree with that. I totally agree with that. And I think people are still wrestling with that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and roll the next clip. I want to put a caveat to this clip. There is going to be violence in there, police violence. And some people have we've played parts of this clip before. We're playing a condensed version of it for tonight's show. It's a key part of 2020, but you've been given the warning. And with that, I'm going to roll the clip.
Police to be held accountable for their actions. We're not going without. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. Stand your ground. Stand your ground.
Seattle Police Department, you're committed to peacefully doing this. Please move back. We're asking you to move back away from the officers.
Stand your ground. Stand your ground.
I don't know if they're doing flashbangs or they're doing tear gas. I don't know.
To the north. And now this is order to disperse. And the left is fine. Move to the north.
And so the protesters turned violent. And it's the police that fired first. And you guys saw it. I don't know if it's smoke or tear gas, but they are completely clearing out the area. I think they were flashbangs. One just went off maybe 15 feet from me. You might have even caught that in the camera. One just went off about 10 feet away from me.
To the Seattle Police Department.
what they're doing now is they're trying to box us in. So they're basically, what SPD is doing right now with their bikes is they are pushing the people into the flashbang grenades. SPD is actively pushing the people into the line of fire. If I wasn't here seeing this, I wouldn't believe this.
Oh, yeah, police department. They're given an order to disperse.
Right? They are pushing us into the line of fire. So in other words, the flashbangs are going off behind me, and I'm being pushed into them. And now they've deployed tear gas. So they've pushed the people into the tear gas. My eyes are burning. So we've retreated back to Rancho Bravo. Things turned very, very quickly. They've deployed tear gas. There are some people who have really, really gotten big. Water! We need water! You gotta tilt your head back. You gotta tilt your head back. Open your eyes.
I'm sailing. I'm sailing. Hey, this is sailing. This is sailing. I got this. Fuck you guys!
Not in her eyes. Spray it around her face, not her eyes.
Close her eyes.
Close her eyes.
Can someone cover her eyes, please?
You're gonna be okay.
Hey, I have saline. Does she need an eye wash?
Yeah, she
Here,
does.
come with me.
Yeah, it's still a hard video for me to watch. You know, and it's been 7 odd months now, just about.
Yeah, that was insane. And you're right, you know, if you weren't there filming it, because so many people are convinced that it's the protesters getting out of line and taking the first steps and antagonizing the police to initiate that kind of response. But that's not, you know, clearly what's happening here. And they're boxing you guys in and they're pushing you into the tear gas and they're doing like all of this very excessive use of force to try and, you know, basically prevent people from gathering and protesting. And it's extremely violent. And I would like to commend you because the fact that you took care of that young lady until she could get some help was really like, that was very moving to me. So that was great. I mean, not great, but like, you know what I'm saying here. That was a really, I think that was very brave of you to really help her out in that way. But some of the things that they were doing, you know, targeting the aid stations, you know, just doing very, very blatantly aggressive, violent and intimidating things to try and, you know, basically prevent people from exercising their right to assemble and protest.
And what was happening was there, you know, March 1st was the first day they came up. Not March 1st, June 1st was the first day that the Western Barricade was created. On June 1st here in Kirkland, there was rumors and we were told to board up our businesses and stuff. And so I was securing my business on June 1st. That's why I wasn't up there on that point. Then that echoed into June 2nd. Then then I had to set everything back up after it was like, well, that was a big fat nothing burger. So that's why there was this gap before I could get back up there on June 6th. A couple of things to point out, especially if this is the first time you're seeing this. Jenny Durkin and Carmen Best, at that time, the police chief, had a press conference on the 7th, basically going, we really screwed up on the 6th. It was unjustified what we did. It was excessive force. There were multiple injuries. They tried, you know, to quasi, it was like, you know, one of these, we're really sorry. We really screwed up. We used a ton of excessive force, but, right? So as soon as you're like, and when you say but, it's not an apology anymore. You could have just stopped at the but.
Yeah, that's like saying, I'm really sorry that you feel that way, you know? Exactly.
And this is also the infamous IED tweet by the Seattle Police, which is still up there for the world to see. And the IEDs were literally candles. Maybe Matthew, because they were the kind of religious candles. So maybe they came from Matthew.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, that was a very intense video to watch. And I wish more people, I think, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, would pay more attention to independent journalism to get a more, I think, holistic and objective kind of narrative rather than what you see that gets filtered through the mainstream media networks. Because this is very there's no disputing what you're seeing in this particular context when you're live streaming, when you're in the middle of this. There's no disputing that. There's no time for somebody to go in and, reshape the narrative to fit a particular story or to fit a particular agenda or to please somebody. So I really think, independent journalism is so important, and I wish more people would really pay attention to that.
The camera doesn't lie. I've said that many times. We're going to go ahead and roll the next clip, but before we roll the next clip, I do want to thank our patrons. Did anything rise to this level of this massive show of force? And the answer to that is no. So here you go. That's where a flashbang went off. We're just and then they got us take the seat. Oh yeah. City of Seattle came in, boarded up, fenced off, put in these concrete barriers. They put in some water-filled barriers that have basically all already been moved. And SPD says that they've pulled kind of anything of value, don't know what that means, out of here. SPD insists that, they have not abandoned this building.
If you see a person of color being targeted by violence, we demand that you step in and help them. We need to make sure that we are not unfairly blamed for any damages to this building, to the Seattle Police Department. We demand that if you see somebody vandalizing this building, you record them so that they can be held accountable for their own personal actions.
Yeah!
Are you for abolishing the police? Are you for getting rid of the police?
Honest answers.
I will give you an answer. And if you know anything about me and my organization, Socialist Alternative, what you will know is that you may not agree with us on certain things. You may agree with us on certain things, you may disagree. But what you will always get from us is honesty. I'm not going to bullshit you. Okay? That's the starting point.
Okay, wait. So I gotta, listen y'all, hold up. I'm doing this for a reason. So look, horseman, right? What about those demands? Huh? Sorry, you didn't know I knew about horseman.
That's the reason you will not catch me saying abolish police or defunding 100%. Not because I don't believe in it, but because I know what it will take to win it. So let's, and another item of no bullshit. Winning 50% defund is going to be goddamn hard.
Again, there's a lot there.
Yeah, a lot there. In the wake of, this excessive use of force and, calls to basically defund the police. There's a lot going on at this very particular moment over the course of June 6th through 8th. There's so much to unpack there. I don't know that we could do it justice even in 1 2-hour show.
Yeah, exactly. And And I agree with that. And there's a lot that went on the cutting room floor. And I still feel like we're packing in too much, to be candid. And there was so much that went on the cutting room floor. So on June 8th, I basically got there just seconds after Seattle police had backed away. And that's why, like, you're seeing these barricades that were getting moved around. And I didn't even realize as I was walking up Pine that I had crossed the line that was the Western Barricade. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, wow, I'm at the East Precinct, because I had just become programmed over the last week. Yeah. This is the line. There's right. I figured there would still be something there. And so I was surprised to see that, like, the metal barricades were removed. That was part of their evacuation.
Yeah, quote unquote evacuation. Yeah. So yeah, this is a very, like, really big turning point. And then we get into more of, like, what do they call it? The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, Chaz.
Chaz, yep.
So I think, I think at that particular moment when the police decide to quote unquote evacuate, because how long did that really last? I think there's a whole lot of momentum there, and a little feeling of hope. I think that manifests a little bit in your videos when you're walking through and looking at it. Well, we'll see the videos, but it's like a farmer's market up there. There's, like, really good community things happening in that particular space. So
one of the things I think is really critical in the clip is, I have said many times, everyone is racist. Mm-hmm. Everyone. And boy, and if you just heard those words come out of my mouth and your reaction was to get defensive, you really need to go look in the mirror. And we saw a demonstration of everyone is racist. And I don't want to be canceling that individual, although that individual was essentially canceled that night. Never saw him again in Chop. Chopper Chaz, and I believe, actually, I'm 99% sure I have seen him in PDX, Portland, for the national audience, but never saw him in Seattle again, and was essentially canceled. There's a lot that was cut out in the interest of brevity, where the whole conversation with Swant was derailed for a good 20 minutes because of him mocking her accent.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Unfortunately, that is so common. I mean, not only is she a woman, but she's a woman of color. And that takes place far too often with a particular demographic of men. So, yeah, I mean, this whole idea that everybody is racist, everybody has got, I mean, it's ingrained in us. It's part of our national narrative. I mean, we have a nation that's built on white supremacy. And I mean, basically everything, you're indoctrinated in it. So for people to stand up and say they're not racist or become defensive about that, you're right. They do need to take a good look in the mirror and be real with themselves, because you're not going to overcome that. And make any kind of meaningful personal or community change until you reflect on that.
And as we saw, racism isn't just an issue for white America. That's why I say everyone is racist in some way. Yeah. And I'm telling you, the minute you go, you know what, I'm racist. I'm telling you, it's like, wow. So much weight comes off of you, because then you start working on making yourself a better person, because you may never in your lifetime change the fact that you're racist, but you can catch yourself in moments and go, I am responding this way because of my ingrained bias, not because of any valid reason for me to respond this way. It's very similar, say, if you're going into therapy, right? If you constantly get into bad relationships because you were programmed to be in bad relationships, when you learn to identify, I am feeling this way, and even though that way feels great, it's not great. I shouldn't feel this way, and I should be running from my life from this person, not running towards them. It's very similar to that. Anyway,
here. No, just kidding. No, and I think that's a really valid point. It's very uncomfortable to admit that you have these particular kind of ingrained reactions. You know, for example, when a Black man, you know, would walk, especially when I was younger, would walk towards me, I would cross the street, clutch my purse tighter. I mean, these are all really uncomfortable things that you have to face now. But now, you know, when you can catch yourself when you're doing these things and realize that, yeah, this is not a natural response. This is a behavior that I was taught. And just as, you know, learned behaviors can be unlearned.
They can. And with that, I'm going to roll the next part of June. We didn't get our taco trucks in every corner, but darn it, we have tacos in the Chaz. And SPD is gone. And I stood here on Monday contemplating what did this strip of road up here symbolize. And now what we have here is just something completely amazing. He's like, hello, human. Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. Look at this face, Malcontent. And this is what you see. People are yelling about this. If you don't know what this can't stoop thing, I think that was Raz giving an interview there, Gregory. I do. Can't stoop is in reference to a Donald Trump tweet. There's your violence in the Chaz. We have a dog barking. Hey, dog.
Our street! Whose streets? Our street! Whose streets? Our street! Whose streets? Our street! Whose streets? Our street!
Or I'm not a leader. I'm just a black person that's tired of going through shit. I don't want to be the leader. I don't want to be none of that.
I am right here on the very, very edge of CHOP, and we'll do a walkthrough because there's been some significant changes that have happened in the area. In agreement with the loose coalition of organizers that are here. The city of Seattle, the fire department, police department, and mayor's office, working with a loose coalition of organizers, as there are no leaders, agreed to modify the footprint of Chaz to enable vehicle traffic for deliveries to business so that they could get right to the doors, and police and fire access for emergency. And the thing is this is just kind of the quick stuff. There'll be so much more. Hey. Is the historical record is just kept there forever. And I know you guys don't care, but 50 years from now, 100 years from now, when you're on the wrong side of the history, maybe not your comments here, but maybe somewhere else, maybe on something with a little more followers, your hateful comment could be on the wall in the Smithsonian Institute. How amazing would that be? And people be looking at you going, how in the hell could anybody think that way?
It's time that we get our due respect. You know, we don't really care about the love. We don't mind. Yeah, we'd like you to love us. But what we demand is that you respect us. On behalf of our ancestors.
You know, Jennifer, I would call June 12th to June 19th the golden age of Chaz CHOP, right? It was called Chaz, and then, as you heard in the video, it became CHOP on June 16th.
Yeah. I agree. There's a lot of, momentum, community empowerment, feeling like, I guess, not for victorious, I guess, but feeling like there had been some meaningful change. and some optimism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was definitely a sense of optimism, and especially like when you consider at that time, COVID at that time, right, is on a pretty significant downward trend at that point. June 1st, the things started opening back up. Restaurants started opening up again. There were we had the Donald Trump don't stoop. I saw that. It was like, I have to put it because I forgot all about. I mean, everyone remembers Kofi, right? But I've totally forgot about the don't stoop, won't stoop, and that was directed at Chaz Chop on one of his tweets. And I think it's important to put there. And just as we've had some interesting comments here tonight, I stand what I say. You know, you may not care in the present tense if you're writing something very, very hateful. The internet's forever. And, you know, it may not be today, it may not be 10 years, but 50 or 100 years from now, your quote with your name may be in a museum somewhere, representative of this is how people were hateful assholes in 2020.
Or in 10 years, you may be in somebody's history book.
Bazing! I don't know who that could possibly be. As we're going to roll for the next clip, there were immediate concerns when this was negotiated with the city, because originally what was happening was there was about a 6-block area that was completely closed off. And it was negotiated with the city to kind of open up these one-way travel lanes. And there were a lot of misgivings when this happened. And I remember we were working on the documentary Black Rain, and on June 19th, we fanned out in all of these different directions. There's a whole crew that I was working with, amazing people. And there were some things that they wanted specifically BIPOC videographers, field producers. So I was asked not to cover those things. I'm like, cool. And so I went over to Judkins and Jimi Hendrix Park. That's why we showed that clip. And I remember, you know, vividly, like when we finished filming on June 19th, we were just buzzing because it was just like, it was like the love, right? You could just feel the love. And it was like, it seemed like something amazing was getting ready to happen. And with that, I'll roll the next clips. Hey there, Malcontents. This here is the Malcontent. How's everybody doing? And welcome. We are at Capitol Hill and Seattle Chopped. If you didn't read what I wrote at malcontentment.com, you can go to malcontentment.com. There's a thing up there, open letter to Chop. You know, one of the things that I wrote is, in any endeavor, in any quest for change, you have to win hearts and minds. And of course, with everything that's been going on, hearts and minds have not been won. I was talking to somebody who, you know, was on the security team, and there's frustration that's been expressed that I agree with in the frustration department, that the attempt to open things up and kind of create these access lanes has really backfired, because what they've turned out to be is these are turned into shooting lanes, and that's what people have been using them for. Yeah, I guess I fall into that camp. But right now what's going on is most people, as I said, are in Cal Anderson Park. You know, it's undeniable. The tenor and the tone has changed. The atmosphere has changed. The mission hasn't changed.
To apply the wrath of God and apply the pressure of unity from a united people of all color that understands when wrong is wrong and right is right. I know you're tired of justifying why Black lives matter in a system where Black lives are treated with no rights. All lives cannot matter if there is no matter for Black lives.
March with us!
We're not done yet!
We're not done yet!
March with us!
March with us!
We're not done yet!
We're not done yet!
Yeah!
Out of your homes and into the streets!
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 This is the march that went from Capitol Hill to the West Precinct. and now to Interstate 5. There was a march I went to, and there was a decision actually not to go on I-5. So I guess my understanding is the highway is closed for 10 miles.
We heard Chief Best. We heard Chief Best talking about how she wanted to reimagine policing. We hear the mayor talking about how she wants to change things. It's up to the citizens of the city of Seattle to hold the politicians accountable. So if there's no accountability, I don't think there'll be change.
Admitting that and realizing and identifying it, and then trying to rip it apart at its core, we could all come together and have kumbaya moments, and I think that we should. I think that one of the things is us coming together and having conversations, and I mean like the right, the left, like all that. That stuff's so stupid. You know, having those conversations, a lot of times you realize you are a lot closer together.
So if you're not familiar with what happened, because we talked about June 19th, on the early morning of June 20th, Lorenzo was shot and killed in Chop, basically outside of Oddfellows Bar, right across the street from Rancho Bravo. After being shot, he essentially stumbled into the street there. There was another shooting about 5 to 15 minutes later. There's different stories, and you know, even the Seattle Police's investigation version of the story doesn't fit. You know, it's but it is a separate shooting from what happened to Lorenzo. That victim claims he was shot by Proud Boys, Chuds, whatever you want to use. Lorenzo, it was gang activity. Obviously, we're not going to run any clip. We're not going to run any of the clips on that, because it's just going to be too traumatic for some of our audience because they were there, and we don't, you know, we want to address it, but we want to address it in a dignified way. And yeah, everything changed, and the feel changed. And where Omari was speaking, Jennifer, on June 26th, that was after this completely bullshit meeting. It was total bullshit with the city, you know, over like what to do. And I got a 1 hour interview with Raz Simone, who was sitting outside waiting to hear what the decision was. And you know what the decision was just a bunch of lip service and political maneuvering.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you were just talking about like the golden age of Chop, and it was really short lived. And just like, you know, the evacuation of the police. And I think some of the things that came as a result of that, the protests and everything, are like really positive, meaningful, changing, you know, kind of dynamic, wonderful things. But I think that part of the larger, or a lot of the issue here is the intentions of the city and the government. And unfortunately, their intentions are not good. I don't think they're honest. And I think it just ultimately ended up being problematic and causing more harm than good. This political theater, this, you know, lip service they're providing. It just, you know, again, we saw this recently with the sweep in Cal Anderson, right? Like, oh, you have so much time. And, you know, people tend not to trust you when you continually break your promises. And so, I mean, so much of this is the city's own doing. Yeah, it's just, I think on that note, though, we should not let the negative outweigh some of the positive things that came from that experience, though, right?
Yeah, and I agree with that. And you know, some things to point out. You know, Fox News in particular is running story after story about how Seattle is in flames, and right, and you've seen in all of this video, right? Is like, no, it's like Seattle's, and we're talking like a 6-block area of the city. Everything else was just business as usual within that 6-block area. The other thing that kind of jumps out to me, right? You're talking about, you know, dishonesty from the city and dishonesty from the government. There's an incident. We'll talk about it actually in the next clip, where it's just kind of this blatant, mind-melting dishonesty that came from Carmen Best. In this next clip, as we lead up to the end of CHOP. As we know things, to steal the words from Joey Wiesner, he put up, I believe, a tweet that said, "I came for George Floyd. I stayed because of the Seattle Police Department." And I'm like, Joey, truth.
Yeah.
Right here too, man. My eyes just became really opened to not how broken the system is, because the system isn't broken. The system works perfectly. It's just an awful system.
It is an awful system, and it's, unfortunately, a very entrenched system that is in great need of being dismantled and rebuilt.
I mean, if you look at the stories that were perpetuated there, right? People living there in businesses are getting extorted for protection money. Oh no, not true. And that story was kind of created by the Seattle Police Department. Oh, the Proud Boys are coming to shoot up the place and kill all the protesters. Now, there was no there. That was literally radiocom traffic to scare people in CHOP. But the national news, which goes back to your point of streamers, right? Because, and in defense of the national news, they can't show an entire stream, right? And if you're a reporter and you're talking to an asshole like me, I mean, look, I'll call myself an asshole, right? Calling an asshole like me, or you're talking to Carmen Best, who are you going to believe?
Oh, I mean, if you're asking like somebody that's not me, of course they're going to look to the person in a position of power for truth.
Of course.
But that's not, as we know, that's not how things work.
It's not. And with that, we're going to go ahead and roll the next clip. I did talk about, hey, this is the end of CHOP. And I want to say there's probably not anything in here that's super triggering. And before I roll this clip, I'll just want to explain. The city said they were going to sweep on the 28th. Mm-hmm. And I was up there bright and early in the morning of the 28th and stayed there till like maybe about 4 hours before sunset. And on June 28th, that is a long ass day to basically get there at dawn and to leave where it's like, okay, it's not enough time. And I did that again on the 29th, and I did that again on the 30th. And I was cooked. And so I did not get up on the 1st and woke up. I actually slept in and woke up to the news that the sweep was on and got down there as fast as I could. And with that, we're going to go ahead and roll the next segment. What the protesters have done is they have cut the hooks on the concrete blocks. 1 second. It's a garbage truck. It's funny, like a truck comes and like everybody just kind of like stops and looks. We're just kind of waiting and wondering if SDOT, when they're coming, if they're going to be coming. I would have guessed they would have come in the morning just because I think, there's less people around. It's going to be easier for them. But no idea if they're going to be coming or not. You guys are going to have to bear with me here.
Absolutely, we want people to move out of the area. Continue, your peaceful demonstration in a place where you're not affecting public safety. I have said this multiple times. It is taking us 3.5 times longer to get here. We have a fire station that is less than 2 blocks from here. They cannot go into this area.
This is just, look at this. I'm in CHOP. You'd think I was at some local farmer's market or something here. This is really amazing what has been set up back here.
They don't want that shit. They never have work. That's it.
You and I talked a little bit yesterday.
They are
target runners, making sure that our spaces are safe. You don't. No, they are regular bikes, bitch. That's what they are. You don't get to tell me. You don't get to tell me what kind of bikes my people are fucking riding. What I'm telling you, it's an expression. I call her a bitch. Bitches are tired. This is my friend. I'm sorry. Thank you. Very poorly. But he said that his producer.
I told her, I just walked up because she gave me a few extra minutes. So. Yeah, so the end of Chaz Chop as we get to July 1 in our journey.
Mm-hmm. See, I mean, ultimately, pretty short-lived. I don't know. There's, again, so much that we could unpack that we don't really have time to unpack right now. But I just, again, feel like we shouldn't overlook the accomplishments of the protests and what CHOP represented for a particular moment in time. We should just think more critically about what it means to be an ally, but also to hold people in power accountable, and especially when they're overpromising and, intentionally under-delivering.
Yeah, so for our viewers, what happened was in the early hours of June 29th, there was 2 more people shot in CHOP. 2 juveniles, 14 and 16, I believe their age, in a stolen Jeep, drove through security, drove into the barricades along there in the East Precinct. They pulled out guns, and there was essentially a gun battle. One of them killed, one of them very severely injured. I'm always cautious because of my deep connections in the medical community not to get into any kind of details at all with anybody who ever goes to Harborview Medical Center, that it isn't just public information. And so that's like the amount of detail that will go to that point. So Chief Carmen Best was doing that interview on the 29th saying how, they couldn't get an ambulance into, but that's not true. And the reason we know that's not true, and we put this on the cutting room floor, I wanted to talk about it with you, Jennifer, is on June 28th, there was a person who had a seizure inside of CHOP, and the ambulance just drove right on in and picked him up, and we filmed the whole thing, which just goes back to people in power lying.
Yeah, and the need to hold them accountable. And that fits in perfectly with their narrative as, Seattle in chaos and CHOP in disarray and being overran by, however they want to portray that. That aligns perfectly. That gave them an opportunity to further entrench that narrative, to further feed it into the mainstream and to breathe life into it, right? And so, I mean, ultimately, from their vantage point, I'm sure this was an opportunity that could not be wasted to further, I guess, embolden their position. But again, it just goes back to, again, the value of streamers, of independent media, to kind of really disrupt and provide more insights and nuance to these mainstream media stories.
And that was actually July 1st is a moment in time for the journey of Malcontentment Tango into Malcontentment News, because we were able to get access in with the press hours after CHOP was down. And we showed that we were on that corner of the East Precinct where from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. to go how little damage had happened. From 5 a.m. to 1 p.m., the tents were gone, the supplies were gone, the concrete blocks were gone, and on the East Precinct building, a lot of the graffiti was already gone.
Yeah, it's amazing how quick that happens, right?
for a burned down city. I mean, they built that faster than the Japanese rebuilt Tokyo after a Godzilla movie for the next Godzilla movie next week.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, because it's funny too, because I had similar like people back in Arkansas. I had a friend back in Arkansas, and he was like, I hear like Seattle is just in a terrible condition. I mean, what's going on up there? And it's like, it's not really, I mean, I don't understand where you're getting this picture from. But it makes perfect sense now when you have stories like that and you have these narratives being intentionally woven based off, things that are tragic for communities, and then using them to further embolden and empower, or not empower, but embolden and cement this kind of very problematic narrative that people in power can use to their advantage.
Agreed. And with that, I'm going to get ready to roll our final clip. And I really want to preface this. This clip is from July 2nd to July 4. If you are not familiar with the history, if this is a history lesson for you, if or you're not familiar with the details, horrible things happened in the protest community on July 4. And I want to say right up front, we are not going to show. There's a video which was taken from a traffic cam. It's a publicly available video. We will not run that video. I will not run that video. I want to make that really clear. We are also not running Omari's video or Diaz Love's video. So I want to preface that, again, we are trying to tell this story with respect and care. But for some people, this next 4 minutes is going to be very, very difficult. And with that, I'm going to roll it.
Wow, this exploded fast. I don't know exactly what caused this, but SPD, as I was just kind of setting up, pushed back hard on the line. They're trying to announce something, but I can't hear any of it.
Protect who? Black people! Protect who? Black people! Black lives matter! Black lives matter!
There's the 12th precinct building, right there. Lights are on. This isn't by any means over. That there's all sorts of protests that have fanned out across the city. If people had relatives calling them, like, oh my God, I heard Seattle's burning down. Are you okay? What do you do? Do you need help? And seriously, we were all like going, what the hell are you talking about? This is what CHOP looks like. Here's the real story. That's the main motivation. The second motivation is anybody that told you, like, the city is in flames, it's going to take forever to rebuild stuff, the whole area has been destroyed. What is like as you can see, most of the graffiti has already been washed away. Same thing over here. Diaz Love was... Wait. On I-5, people were hit on the freeway? Oh, for fuck's sake. So the people were hit in the southbound lanes.
They already know who did it and
Yeah, they caught him.
Oh, they've already caught him.
They already caught him?
Yeah.
Where did they catch him?
Yeah, he was detained at the...
Do you mind if I...
No, go for it. That's
Which exit?
This exit right over here.
What we know right now, 3 people hit. Concrete Media, Converge Media were both on the road. The driver of the vehicle is in custody that did this crime. The driver intentionally hit the protesters. The protesters were actually not even on in a travel lane. They were in the median. They were over here, apparently, about where this police cruiser is. And the driver went around not only the police barricades, but the protesters organize and have vehicles come up, and the state police are aware of this, to also be blocked vehicles. What we're told is, and I guess what happened in the video, and I haven't seen the video yet, is the vehicle came around the stopped vehicles here, then swerved to about where this police cruiser is to intentionally hit the protesters.
Good news. I guess in the big scope of things, there's what? There is good news. 2 people hit. I watched the video. Sorry. It's hard to watch. I watched the video.
It's still hard to watch.
Mm-hmm. I can't even imagine.
Why don't you talk for a minute, Jennifer?
So, for a while there were people going in and continuing to protest. And I was going back and forth quite a bit in the evening between where I live, which is in North Seattle. I'm right by the University of Washington, in West Seattle. And I mean, sometimes they were great about telling you, hey, there's protesters on the highway. Other times, not so great about letting people know that these things were taking place. I'm not talking about the protesters. I'm talking about the police. And it was my understanding that there was advanced knowledge of these protests and when they were regularly taking place. And so, I mean, it wasn't a heavy traffic time. It was usually in the evening. So it wasn't like a big deal to go around and, go past where they were at and then, get back on I-5 and do what you needed to do. So I, recall driving by usually every night and seeing what was going on there. What I think is particularly interesting about this video is just how raw and real it is, because you're doing this one thing at this moment and you're like, okay, I'm done doing this. And all of a sudden you get this, notification and you're like, what's going on? And you rush to this spot and this is what's happened. This very intentional, this very, I don't even know, this intentional act of violence, because this wasn't something that was accidental. They had to cross over a median and actually hit people. And ultimately it cost somebody their life. It was injured severely 2 other people. Am I correct?
One other person. So I know we said 3, and then when I was because it was a very dynamic situation. The initial reports were several fatalities, and then was several people hit. Then it was 3 people hit, and then 2 people hit. And again, it's one of these situations because of my connections and contacts. I wasn't asking. I'm not going to ask. I didn't realize until we were researching for this show that my reaction on getting the news is there, that I was engaged at that point actually with a chat, and I was just at that point starting to get comfortable on turning the camera to myself. Longtime Malcontents have known I've gotten way better on the camera, and it's been like a 4-year journey, literally, to be able to stand up here, just stare at the camera and be semi-watchable. And I was just kind of tipping over. I had no idea that, this, where were you, right? But it's not about me. There's more to that end of the video, as you know, Jennifer, and I clipped it because I just felt it was too heavy. It was too much. Because my reaction gets really raw, past where we ended that video.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a testament to the community of like independent journalism and streamers. But a young woman ultimately lost her life as a result of this. And then somebody else was, severely injured. And I think I don't know how these things happen or why they happen. But again, this was an intentional act of violence. It was a very, I think, sombering and sad moment. And I think that your reaction, I think, really encapsulates all of that.
And we got news earlier today that Dawit Khalid, who is accused of the murder of Summer Taylor and the vehicular assault of Diaz Love, was released out of jail today with no supervision requirements whatsoever.
How does that even happen?
Well, because the system works perfectly, and it's not a racial issue, right? Because he is a BIPOC individual also. But as we have seen, when it comes to the protest community, from the level of the police, from the prosecutor's office, from the right, there is not an equal playing field.
No, there's not. There's not.
So, and with that, we're going to go ahead and roll our almost runner-up story.
Which is fantastic.
The dancer is Tabitha. Kipper, do tell more.
So check it out, anticipate the sound of it. And move your antibody to this revolution. We gon' be fucking with them pros. Most calls they fight.
One of my watchers said if they arrest her, start a riot.
That is a very famous protest icon. I think I will call her that, Tabitha Poppins. And I did confirm with Tabitha, does go by she, her in their pronouns. And we actually have a lot of video of Tabitha dancing, but in the interest of brevity and time, and also to kind of just go, after this really heavy journey from May 30th to July 4, and also by like request from our from the mods, the admins, and from some of our patrons, when I put out into the ether, hey, what do you think is a story? And Tabitha's name came up all over the place.
It's an amazing video. And I was like, that video just made my entire day, because I actually saw that one earlier today. And I was like, fantastic. Yeah. So I'm really glad that you got to run that.
She's got some moves.
She does. She totally does. And
I have Jewish white boy moves. So I couldn't move that way if my life depended on it. And so with that, we're going to go ahead on our journey to story number 4. Oh, you know what? Before we do that, because I haven't done this like through the whole show, if you appreciate our mods and our admins and our research team, they're not paid in money, they're paid in hearts. So what you could do is spam those hearts. If you're on Periscope, Twitter, or Facebook, spam away in those hearts. Let them know that you appreciate them and give them that love. I know that on Twitch and on YouTube, you can't do hearts, so you could just say like, I love you mods, or put a row of hearts in the comments up there. There was also a comment, Jennifer, earlier that I kept wanting to circle back but we were getting into this heavy part of it, and it just didn't seem, when I made the comment about, Carmen Best versus me, are they going to listen to the asshole? Or somebody says, I prefer to listen to the asshole. So thank you, Malcontents, for preferring to listen to the asshole. And with that, this asshole is going to roll story number 2. You know, Jennifer, there's a rule in journalism to never become the story. And I have told, like, streamers have come to me and have reached out to me through the internet looking for counsel or advice. And that has always been one of when people are what I call, I think streamers fall into three categories. I think you have like the journalistic style, indie journalism, and that's me. And if I think of indie journalists, I think of people like Lakota Lichtwalt. I think of Ian over at Concrete Reporting. I think of Omari Salisbury. I think the second category you have is you have people who are photojournalists. They kind of let the camera do the talking and they don't say a whole lot. Sol Luna, I think, is down in PDX, was a great example of somebody who I think is a photojournalist. And then you have activist streamers. And if we think of people in the community here, Calypso had Brad Fox immediately come up to the top. Barb from Ground Level News out of Salt Lake City. Mad love for Barb. I think she is one of the best activist streamers in the country. And all three of those groups supply different things. But there is this rule. You don't become the story.
Way to go, David.
And story number 4 takes us to September 7th. And I'm going to roll the first clip. Flashbangs are out. Flashbangs are out. Seattle police units are coming from the south. Flashbangs are out.
Are beating people. I do not understand that. This way, we gotta go this way. We gotta come this way. Sis, here. Woo. They're gonna get me before they get you. Come on, let's go.
Violent! No reason! Violent!
I'm going to get a nice little viewpoint on the side
Oh,
here.
Jesus, Matthew, seriously, bro. Shut. Flashbangs out. Flashbangs out.
Our comments lit up, Jennifer, with people calling out Christina D, Black Rev Girl Media, and Future Crystals as great examples of activist streamers. And yes, absolutely agree with all of the above. Future Crystals is actually one of the reasons I started becoming a streamer. So, and I've had some conversations with him, and he and Omari was an inspiration to me. So, yeah, the Spog March, the second Spog March.
Oh my goodness. I'd also like to give a shout out to the person last week that reminded me about Dolly Parton when I was talking about old country music. So shout out to that person. That was amazing. Oh yeah. Yeah. Crazy times. And then you had to go and drop your press pass.
Oh, you're just going to go segue into the second part? Yeah, we'll just go ahead and do that, right? Because if you're not familiar with the story, you might be going, well, I don't understand. How did you become the story? Oh, before I even got to my truck that night, iPhone was blowing up with, dude, you have just become the story.
And even more public, the Seattle Police Union president is under investigation because of a social media post. The post involved an independent journalist who was covering protests. KOMO's Jonathan Cho is live in Seattle with the exclusive story tonight. Jonathan?
Eric, the Office of Police Accountability says numerous complaints are now starting to come in about Union President Mike Solin's tweet. The independent journalist says the tweet's unprofessional and put his life in danger.
Wear a helmet.
David Obelts tries to anticipate every scenario.
The camera doesn't lie.
But he never saw this one coming.
Mike Solin puts up a pretty snarky tweet with the full picture of my press pass.
Accompanied by a comment that reads in part, "Unfortunately, in your hasty escape from Spog a few minutes ago, you dropped your press pass. Since I have it, does this mean I'm now part of the resistance?"
That's doxing.
Doxing is essentially putting someone's personal information online for everyone to see.
At the end of the day, that put my family in danger.
There's no doxing here at all.
Mike Solin's the president of the Seattle Police Officers Guild.
That's his press pass he wore on the outside of his garment.
On Monday, this surveillance video shows Obelts accidentally dropping his badge near Guild headquarters during another violent clash between protesters and police.
I did him a favor by picking it up.
However, complaints about the tweet are pouring in. The Office of Police Accountability looks into allegations of police misconduct and is now investigating. The agency says other SPOG presidents in the past have faced complaints, but ones against top officials are rare.
This is poll cam.
Obelts is known for holding a giant selfie stick in the crowd, live streaming numerous marches, including one to Solin's house last month in the middle of the night,
where I have my family inside. What about my security?
That one in particular enraged Solin.
For him to claim to be the victim, I think it just strikes of irony here.
But Obelts says he has every right to simply broadcast what's going on and believes he's being unfairly lumped in with all the protesters, even though he's an independent journalist.
I've had to work very, very hard to work and to be able to embed into these different groups.
Solin is doubling down and says he's not removing the tweet. Mike, do you feel like you're taking this a bit too personally?
I think he is. The fact that you're having an interview with me about him claiming to be a victim is absolutely comical.
Now, Solin says he's not concerned about the complaints or the ongoing OPA investigations. In fact, he says he's invited Obelts back here to Guild headquarters to pick up that press ID. So far, no response. Live from Seattle, Jonathan Cho, Como News.
Oh,
the comments are amazing. This way. The comments are amazing.
Blasting his picture all over social media rather than trying to quietly contact him to let him know he dropped his self pass. You commendable stand-up man, you.
I'll let you know that for my interview, Jennifer, I wore my formal black bloc attire.
Oh, you did? Well, that was very professional of you.
Yes.
I love how the poll got to have its moment to shine as well.
The poll got, yes, the poll got to had its moment in there also. So a few things that I kind of want to unpack here, right? This whole middle of the night thing was 9 o'clock at night. In the summertime in Seattle, like people, right? So we were there about sunset. Here's the other thing. Anybody that has worked or been at any of the protests after the incident that happened with Summer Taylor and Diaz Love, time and location became top secret.
Yeah.
And all you knew was show up here at this time and we are going to go somewhere else. And we're not going to tell you anything. And I have always operated as an independent journalist. And people here, like, I've heard it on the streams. Like, people will come up to me because, like, oh, he's a press dude. Like, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know. I showed up with the camera. That's why I'm here. The other thing, Jennifer, because you probably haven't seen this whole stream, I actually am bitching on that stream. Flat out bitching as we're walking to Solin's house because we're going like down this real narrow alleyway. And I have been thoroughly traumatized by the Seattle Police Department at this point and going down little narrow kind of alleyways. The other thing is pole cam. It's the only time it's ever happened hooked on a power line because we were in this narrow like thing down there. The next thing, and then I'm going to let you talk, that I find really ironic is Como blurred out and you know, I'm not like getting Como, but they blurred out Solin's house in one clip.
Yeah.
And then they showed it in the next clip.
There was so much like problematic about what he did, like his whole, proclaiming himself to be the victim. Like, dude, you're a public official. You should be held accountable for shit. And what he did was petty. It was unprofessional. It was like high school level drama. I have this thing. Now I'm going to flash it for all the world to see and make your life a little miserable while you're at it. Because the thing is, with the internet the way it is now, all you need is somebody's first and last name, and you can find out a whole bunch of information about them, right?
Yes.
So I think it was very fair for you, especially, in the position you're in. You've been streaming protests, you've been doing these things, and we know how people who don't agree with that can behave. It was very fair for you to be concerned about the safety of you and your family, right? But for him to try and flip the narrative and like make himself the victim, I was like, oh, good Lord. There's so much I could say about him, but man, he is one problematic dude.
We are not the same.
Yeah,
I'm an American.
Very petty.
You're a sick asshole.
That might have been a little harsh, little bump that I played there for that. I got death threat phone calls. I got death threat emails. There were kind of cars that drove by the house. I got people, emailing me my address, So at my work, getting emails and messages there. That was the immediate fallout from that. So this was like a very real reality. And every now and then, like, well, why are you running this story? Because every now and then, because the tweet is still out there, it bubbles up into the sphere and it gains a little bit of life and it gets shared around and more likes and stuff. And as far as I know, Mike Solon is OPA is still investigating. I'll say it again. I never filed a complaint with OPA because OPA useless. And I'm just like, I'm not even wasting my energy. But as you heard on the Como story, a whole lot of people took care of filing that for me.
Yeah, and it wasn't like, it's just you complaining about being doxxed. It's a whole lot of other people going, hey, this is unprofessional, unacceptable behavior, and you need to do something about it.
Yeah. And what that something was, well, we'll see. And of course, the answer to that will probably be a whole lot of nothing. And with that, we're getting to story number 1. But we have one more runner-up story.
Tell you this not because I'm a conspiracy theorist, but because I've traveled tens of thousands of miles over the last couple months, talked to tens of thousands of people, and looked through tens of thousands of pieces of information from all angles and sides, used something they teach us not to use, which is called critical thinking, based on my experiences of traveling the world and the country my entire life, and drawn my own conclusions. What they want to do and what they teach us is, here is your truth on a silver platter. Here's your truth on a silver platter. Do not think about it, do not question it, here's what it is. You know why they want us to not question it? Because they want to control us. Right now we're in the midst of a coup. Up until 6 weeks ago it was non-violent. What happened in Minneapolis was an execution, a public execution specifically designed. I'm not saying this because I saw a meme on the internet. I'm saying this because 2 days after that I jumped on a plane and went there. I went to where it happened. I talked to people that were there when it happened. I didn't personally see it happen, and I didn't personally speak with the murderer or the executioner, but I spoke with people who were there. So, and they could have lied, but I don't know why they would. So you see this blood on this flag? This happened on Sunday afternoon in front of Olympia City Hall. We were down there for a protest very similar to this. It was a hot dog cookout. I had some signs made very similar to those signs that pot signs the big four. Okay, so they were very similar to that, but it was Citizens for Olympia politicians stepping down due to their dereliction of duty and failing to uphold law and order. They've tied the hands of the police, and we've had riots on the street of Olympia nightly. So we've had to go down there, not in an aggressive or an agitated way, but just saying we love our First Amendment rights. We want you guys to exercise them. Just don't burn our city down.
Yeah, right.
Jennifer, do you know how batshit crazy Peter Diaz of American Wolf is?
I do not, and unfortunately, I didn't get to see that clip because I think you added it after you had sent me all of the other clips. So I have no clue what was going on here.
So Peter Diaz of American Wolf is so batshit crazy that the Proud Boys and the 3%ers are like, dude.
Wow, that's a lot. Like, I mean, isn't like the 3%ers whole premise that like only 3% of the population actually fought in the revolution? And that is batshit crazy in and of itself. But for them to like reject this dude, that says a lot.
And the reason we know that is if the last time I looked at American Wolf's Twitter, I would suspect they have probably gone to Parler because that's the kind of person he is. As you, but. Like the three, like he was bagging on the 3%ers, and they were just like, dude, no.
Wow.
His organization, American Wolf, was down in Portland on 9/26 for, the start of the American Civil War. And I say that flippantly now. The reality is, and the mods and admins know a story that one day when I write a book, that will be in the story. They know the story, right? Everyone was kind of expecting American Civil War because of all of the rhetoric that was coming out of that. Yeah. And they had about 500 people. And by all reports, about 200 of those people were press from all around the world that were there to see the start of the American Civil War. They left early and they went to hang out at the mall in Vancouver, meaning the Chuds. I'm going to play the Chud thing.
Chud. Cannibalistic, humanoid, underground dwellers.
It was actually where I heard the term Chud used to refer to the extreme far political right. Was a 9/26, and a couple of people like, where'd Chud come from? And I'm like, I don't know. And I literally, I woke up in the morning, I was like, oh my God, I know what Chud is. It's cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller from the terrible 1984 movie. That's what it's from, and it fits. There was a group of people from American Wolf that got arrested, and this is when they were all leaving, and their compatriots, as they were driving by, and this is all on camera, were laughing and pointing and laughing and saying things like "sucks to be you" as they drove by and getting arrested and searched. And it's a juxtaposition for me of this far-right ideology of rugged individualism to the point that they don't even operate as a unit, to the far-left ideology of this collectivism. And there is strength in that I think is grossly underestimated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I wish I would have gotten to see that clip. Now I can hear.
Well, you can see it after the show, and we have Katie is in there, and I had a conversation with Katie and explained to Katie that I actually defended her. Katie got maced at an event. She did nothing; just someone came up and maced her. I witnessed it. And on one of our happy hours, I called it out, and I'm just like, I wouldn't want someone to just come up and mace me just because. You may not agree with her political ideology. She may be getting a paycheck from Turning Point USA, and Turning Point USA is absolutely this awful organization that is almost certainly getting foreign money to drive wedges. I get all of that. But at the end of the day, she's an independent journalist, like it or not. Now, if she had punched someone in the face, of course you could mace her all day long. And she slagged me out, literally on the same day over something totally different. I became a big target of her for whatever reason on literally the same day I defended her. And this happened with Mike Solon too, because on the march, one of the people in the comments asked this. Mike Solon did change his address. This whole thing on the voter fraud registration, all that investigation is closed. And I even talked about that on that September 7th stream before I dropped my press pass. And because I had been hammering on this investigation when it became out as a news story, and I had learned what, that it had been closed. And I even said on the stream, it's like, and I'm not bringing it up anymore because there's no point in bringing it up. It's been fixed, the end. So anyway, we have Katie in there, and Katie, I don't know. She's one of the oldest 26-year-olds I have ever seen in my life. Oldest looking. I don't know. And on that happy note, we're going to make a pause for the cause. We're going to make one more, because we haven't talked about this for 2 hours, and we're almost to the finish line, and I know you have a date. So we're going to do a little pause for the cause. We're going to get to the final story.
Thank you.
Hi, Malcontents. I'm David, the Malcontent, and I'd like to talk to you for a moment about supporting independent media. When you support us, you help us bring the before, during, and after. You help us defend the First Amendment. You help us amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices, and you help us hold leaderships at a local, state, and federal level accountable. None of this would be possible without support by viewers just like you. When you become a patron for as little as $5 a month, you help buy technology, safety equipment, and help cover travel expenses so that we can continue to bring you news that you trust. If you can't become a patron, you can do a one-time donation on Venmo, and your dollars will go to the exact same causes. With your continued support, we can continue to amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices while showing the truth on what is happening in the world around us. Once again, thank you. All right. And I want to say thank you to Daniel. Danielle, before we ran that spot, thank you, a new patron. Tonight is the last night. You can't get a black box from the Ally League in the fancy box, but you still can because we have one. And we're going to be doing a drawing on Monday for the black box. If you become a patron subscriber before midnight our time, Pacific Standard Time, tonight, the cutoff is at 11:59 and 59 seconds. You will go into the drawing for that black box. Again, we're going to do a drawing live here on the 4th. And the way it works, for every $5 of a patron pledge for the month that you put in, you get essentially a raffle ticket in there. So if you become a $10 patron, you get 2 tickets. Become a $20 patron, you get 4 tickets, so on and so on and so on. So please help keep us independent. Please support independent media. Daniel, thank you so much for your generosity this evening and becoming a patron with us. And with that, we're going to roll to story number 5. I say story number 5, it is story number 1. And with that said, story number 1 is the political fallout. And I think that is the biggest story of 2020 because there has been a lot of political fallout. And Jennifer, let's start with Carmen Best.
Yeah, Carmen Best lost her job. She no longer, she was the first female woman police chief in 150 some years of the history of the Seattle Police Force. She ended up losing her job over multiple things that happened, but I was reading some earlier stuff today and she was talking about the way that she was treated. This wouldn't have happened had she not both been a woman and a woman of color, a Black woman. And then, of course, moving on to Mayor Durkin.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, Mayor Durkin. One thing I'd like to circle back on Carmen Best. If we go back to June 8th and the decision to leave the East Precinct, Jenny Durkin is on record going, not it.
Yeah.
Carmen Best is on the record going, not it. So from Omari to Como to Cairo to the question's been asked. Seattle Times, Stranger, Crosscut. All right, if it wasn't Carmen Best and if it wasn't Jenny Durkin, then who did it? And nobody's come forward. Now, the suspicion is that it was the Seattle Police Officers Guild decision in a we'll show you. And that's why because we're not getting supported anymore. Yeah. You said on the 7th, we can't tear gas and we can't do these things because we went a little ape shit on the 6th. Yeah. And they essentially packed up their ball and took their home. By the fact that Carmen Best is saying, A, I didn't give the order, and B, I don't know who did.
Yeah.
Look, I get she's black. I get she's woman. And I get that she climbed through the ranks to get to those are all admirable things. But it's a failure of leadership, or she's covering for somebody.
Absolutely. No, and I mean, this was just me kind of repeating what she had stated about why she's no longer there. But yeah, no, absolutely. To not know you're that in that high ranking of a position, to not know why calls are being made or who's making them, is definitely a failure of leadership.
And then, as you said, you have Mayor Durkin, which is said on December 7th, I believe, is like, hey, you nut meats, I don't want a second term on this rodeo. She then went on to clarify, the next day, going, I could win a second term.
Yeah.
But I don't want to put myself through that.
Yeah, you don't want to put yourself through that because you were so poor at it the first time. Why do it twice? I mean, talk about a failure of leadership and not being able to, or at least being able to make decisions behind closed doors, but not being able or being brave enough to watch how those decisions pan out and that on the ground effect that they have on the lives of real people. I mean, that to me is an absolute failure in leadership too. If we're going back again to Cal Anderson and the sweep, and this is her, the city and her ultimately making the decision to do this, but she can't be there to watch what her decisions, the repercussions of her decisions on real living people. So I think that, along with, everything that happened over the course of the summer, for her to be like, oh yeah, I'd get reelected. I don't know what kind of fairy tale world she's living in, but it's clearly not the same one I'm living in.
Yeah. The little bit that I could see from where I was on the fringes, I saw Jenny Durkin trying to move pieces on the chessboard during the chop phase. Yeah. And it was impotent and incompetent. It was really shocking to me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I really, when Jenny Durkin was elected, I don't live in Seattle, but when Jenny Durkin was elected as an outsider, my view was they've elected somebody who is at least a little more moderate. And because we had just a series of mayors where it was just what is going on? And I know moderate for some of my audience is this dirty word, right? But I'm talking about, some of the decisions, say, on transportation infrastructure that were made in this whole idea that, hey, everybody's just gonna, ride bikes. And just ignoring how hilly Seattle is and how crappy the weather is 7 months out of the year. And how 88% of people in Seattle live in single family homes. So there isn't this density.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know. You talked about her incompetence and her failure of leadership. And it's unfortunate that like the first two people we've talked about in the context of like a failure of leadership and incompetence happen to be women. But here we are. And
134 SPD officers put 2 middle fingers in the air and said, fuck you nut meats, I quit or I'm going somewhere else.
Yep. They did.
And that will continue to happen. I think that's another part of the fallout that we have here.
Absolutely. Not only are we what, an anarchist jurisdiction? We were on fire for half the summer. I mean, who would want to work for? Who would want to stay here?
That's right. I forgot about that in the political fallout. We're an anarchist jurisdiction. That is part of the political fallout. Another part of the political fallout. Federal troops were sent here, but they packed up and left like 24 hours later.
Yeah. Apparently it was so crazy they couldn't handle it. They had to be too. So.
I think of another piece of the political fallout, SPD budget cut 18%. However, because of budget shortfalls due to COVID and a reduction in tax collection, and for our national audience, Washington State does not have an income tax, a state income tax. The biggest tax generators in the state is property tax and sales tax. It's a very regressive tax system here. And the other thing is, in Washington State, if you have an economic downturn and say hotels are, because we have lowest hotel occupancy in the country at 20%, restaurants aren't serving, so you're not getting meal taxes. People aren't flying to the airport and rental car, because rental car tax, like here in Seattle, is almost 100%. All of that, and I know that that's SeaTac is different, right? It's Port of Seattle, and it gets into this whole weird thing. But revenue is way down. So there was going to be some cuts anyway, and 18-ish% is not 50%.
Yeah, no. It is not. I don't even know.
So let's see here. Let's run off a couple of names. Ari Hoffman, you think he's going to run for mayor?
Oh, did we have this discussion a couple of weeks ago?
We did, but we could just like fast, yes or no? What was that?
We already determined that whoever decides they want to run for mayor has some serious red flags that must be in.
Well, this is yes.
So can we narrow down the list with those as the parameters?
Brandy Cruz. Could you see Brandy Cruz running for mayor? Or do you think she's just bucking for a job at Fox News?
I would go with the latter. I would definitely go with the latter. Yeah.
Andre Taylor. This is a name I've heard mentioned.
Yeah. Everybody always wants to know what Nikita Oliver is going to do.
Nikita Oliver, I was gonna say, and I think Nikita Oliver would make a very interesting mayor, but coming into beyond a hornet's nest in a mess at this point.
Oh, absolutely. And then is that something she really wants to get ensnared in with all the other things she's got going on?
Do you have your New Year's bubbles?
What?
Do you have your New Year's bubbles?
I don't have New Year's bubbles.
Oh.
Was
Some date we're having here.
Oh my God.
All right. And with that, Happy New Year to you, Malcontent.
Happy New Year. I hope it's a really great one.
I'm going to have a drink for you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
It's been one hell of a 2020, that's for sure. And if we look ahead to 2021, the shit show's just going to continue. We have it on the crawler on the bottom of the screen there on just where things are going to go. Lots of comments here, people wishing us Happy New Year. Jennifer, I see it go by. We've run way over from what we planned, but I think this was a great show. Thank you again. And I'm going to put it out there one more time. You've got a few hours left to become a patron and have an opportunity to win that black box. And start us off right in a great trajectory for 2021. Jennifer, thank you so much. And we will see you on Monday, I guess, correct?
Yes. Happy New Year, everybody. Have a wonderful and safe evening.
Yes. Happy New Year to everyone. Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
You fit the profile. You're the malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
He said malcontent Antifa. Fuck you.
You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.